Hey y'all, and welcome back to Dr. Mandy Unedited, the podcast where we're talking all about research, writing, and academic realness and your PhD. I'm Dr. Mandy, your new unofficial PhD advisor, and today we're talking all about burnout in your PhD. Today, we're going to talk about some of my personal journeys into navigating academic burnout. We're going to talk about how to recognize the signs and how to address it. Okay, so the TLDR really is that we have this really toxic thing in academia where we think overworking is the best and it is resilience, and it really isn't, man. Like, we are totally killing ourselves out there. And I'm seeing way too many academics recently just struggle on their own and not really know that this is not okay the way that we push ourselves. And so I think it's really important to discuss how we're going to find a balance in our life. Of course, I always preach that doing the PhD should be one of your top priorities. It shouldn't be second to anything. However, you should also have one of those other top priorities, your own well being. But first, let's talk about all the goss. And the goss today, y'all, is probably going to be an update on my personal research life. I feel like my research world has just been a whirlwind over the past, especially the past couple of weeks. And so I just want to let you know what I'm up to, what I'm getting on with. I've really been focused in developing myself as a collaborator and a networker, just like getting my face out there. I think like the first several months that I worked in research in the UK, I was kind of in the background a lot. And so now that I've kind of gotten into some like new research experiences, I find that, oh man, like I kind of missed out on a lot of really great networking opportunities and things like that. So I've really been working very, very hard on, yeah, just like getting my face out there. And I want to give a shout out to anyone that's listening that has, taken the time to have conversations with me and help me understand what resources are out there and inviting me to meetings and groups and introducing me to people. It's really, really been awesome. And so this weekend, I had the opportunity to go to a little research event in a place called Exeter. And this was like the first time that I had been to Exeter, and it was really, really freaking cool. And it was also really cool because I took my partner with me, and this was like the first time that he kind of like got an experience to see about what I do in research. And so the event that I went to, it was not it was like kind of like a research conference, but it was open to like the public. It was very family friendly and things like that. So you had the typical things that you would see in these research events where people have like their posters and they're showcasing their research, but they kind of had like a lot of interactive hands-on things. There's like Play-Doh, there was tech, there was all these cool things that kids could get involved with. And I just think that's just like a really great way because I mean, I'm really passionate about getting people that are not necessarily academics into research. And so it was a really, really cool event. And again, my partner was there with me, just like watching him ask all of the the research questions and stuff like that, and just understanding like what I do when I, present at these events as well was pretty cool. It was also really interesting because the night before, we just so happened to be watching a documentary on, I guess, like archaeological findings in the UK. And in this documentary, they were showcasing a lot of really cool technological tools that they use to kind of like build like 3D models and I don't know, just kind of like map these bigger structures. Like the one that they were using as an example in the show was a ship that had been shipwrecked in like Cambridge somewhere, but they dug it up in like some random football field. So it was really cool at the research event that we went to that they actually had all that tech there. And so to like see it in person and to kind of get a little bit more explanation about how that works was really freaking cool. But one of the other things that I wanted to kind of like segue into with that is that we went to the museum, the local museum, after we went to the research event. And I think so, like, if you are from the US, as you know, I'm an American living in the UK. If you're from the US, look, one of the things that I find really interesting about the world is how much better museums are outside of the US, y'all. I have been to, museums all over the world, and I'm always impressed just like how put together, how informative, how like beautiful they are. And it's not that you can't get that experience in the US, but one of the things that I love about the UK is that they often have free museums wherever you go. And whenever I hear like, oh, a free museum, that sounds really kind of like whatever. I've been to free museums in the US, and they do what they can do. But the museums in the UK are just absolutely stunning. Like, I mean, like, they are high quality, gorgeous museums. And a lot of times they're free, which blows my mind because like the same type of museum that you go to in the US, it could easily be like, $30 or $40 just to like get into them. So we went to, I believe it's called the RAM, RAM in Exeter, and that was really cool because it had just loads of eclectic things, really, like animals, things from all over the world. It had so one of the things about Exeter is that it has a lot of Roman history. It's surrounded, I guess, by a Roman wall, and so there was a lot of stuff about Roman whatever history there. And again, another cool thing that we were watching in the documentary I was talking about the night before was how to strike coins and some like history between like the Roman coins and then getting into like, the King Henry VIII era. If you don't know the history of King Henry and how he made coins back in the day, you should definitely look it up because it's really, really interesting. But again, it was kind of like all that stuff that I saw the night before was now present in my face in the museum. One of the other cool things about this museum that I think my partner really appreciated, because if you didn't know, he is Fijian, and he said that he had been to this museum before, and they used to have a huge display of like some sort of Fijian costume, traditional costume of some sort. I'm not sure what it was, but it was no longer in the museum, which I think like in the past there had been kind of a push to return that to Fiji. So I think it was really meaningful to him to see that that wasn't in there. Of course, like they still have a lot of like the Fijian war clubs and things like that, which he always likes to like go and look at because, I mean that's history, but like those bigger, more like more meaningful things that might be more rare that don't necessarily belong in a museum in England were no longer there. So, that was kind of like a really interesting thing to realize, I guess. But anyway, enough ramblings about, whatever my personal life. Let's talk about burnout in academics. Okay, so like I said, yeah, it's this really toxic thing that we've got going on where, we're kind of just taught that we need to really push ourselves, and we've got to go to the nth degree to be successful in academics. But I think it's about time that we really start championing well-being at the same level as all of that hard work we're putting in. So I want to tell you a little bit of my personal story first before we get into some more technical things. I talk about all the time how my PhD was a really it was a revolutionary experience for me. I really learned how to thrive in my PhD, and I don't want to say that as, like, oh, you should be too. A PhD is definitely hard. There are so many different circumstances that so many different people are handling. And, so like, yeah, I can't stand here and say, like, oh, it was great for me. It should be great for you. Because the reality is, like, it's hard for a lot of people. So, my academic burnout really comes before my PhD. And yeah, it was definitely a struggle. I've talked about a lot on this podcast and on my social media about how I was just diagnosed with ADHD just this past year. So I've, lived my entire life and my entire academic life not knowing that I was one, neurodivergent, but also not really understanding how to take care of myself as a neurodivergent person in academics. And I think that, the history that I have with burnout has definitely revealed that. So, if you didn't know, before I got the PhD in education, I actually studied music. Music was, the one thing when I was a kid that I really, really wanted to study. So, I have a bachelor's degree, a post-bac, and a master's degree in music. And as I also talk about a lot, is because I didn't know I had ADHD and I just basically have a completely different learning style from everyone else. I've always really struggled with academics, and I spent a lot of my life thinking that I was just plain stupid. And so, one of the first major things of academic burnout happened, when I was in my bachelor's program. I kind of decided that, since I wasn't really great at the academic side of it, then I had to be great at like the music side of it. So, how it all started is that I started going into the studio and practicing like 8 hours a day. I would be in the studio at 7 a.m. practicing all my stuff. I would go to a class. I would come, if I had like an hour in between, I would be practicing in the studio. I was going to all of my music rehearsals and everything. And then, at night, sometimes I wouldn't get home until 9 or 10 at night because I was hitting up the studio one more time. And I kind of developed this thing in my head about, like, yeah, that's what's going to make me a great musician, because they have like that saying about, whatever, 10,000 hours of practice or whatnot. So I was like, I'm going to get there. But as a result, I started, yeah, I mean, I really didn't focus on anything else. I started, not eating. I lost like a ton of weight. I'm like almost 6 feet tall, and at one point during my bachelor's degree, I weighed only 120 pounds. My body was just like completely shutting down. My family literally thought that I was gonna die. And then to like kind of like cope with all of that, on top of like the fact that, my grades were really, really poor, like no matter how hard I studied, I started getting into like really unhealthy relationships with people. I started, drinking, not drinking a lot, but like kind of just like drinking just to like get myself to sleep at the end of the night. And I talk about all the time how I was a two-time university dropout. I dropped out once in my bachelor's and once in my master's. And, that was really a fast track to get in there. So, I think especially once I really had like the weight issues and I got really, really sick. Like sometimes I couldn't even like get out of bed for a week because I was in so much pain from my body, literally just shutting down because I wasn't giving it the sustenance I needed. Once I really went through that, that hit me hard. And so I really started to focus on how my well-being can really be, just as important as the practice and the study. And so now I've kind of replaced all of those really harmful practices with focusing on well-being routines throughout my day, not only in my academic career, but now like as that I'm a researcher, it's still really, really important to me to take care of myself just as much as I'm abusing myself, really. And so some of the ways that I do that is, well, first, I'm a runner. I love to run, not just, for, I mean, I literally don't do it for time or to improve on anything. I just get up in the morning and I go for a run because that really sets my mind straight, and it makes me like kind of proud that, like I'm taking care of my body in some way, like I'm improving my cardiovascular, my heart health. My skin has always been, I've been running for probably about 6 or 7 years now. My skin has always been pretty good since then. And that also motivates me to stay pretty healthy in my eating because, I'm kind of like, if I put in the effort into taking care of my body, in a physical way, like also I gotta take care of like what goes in it. So I've really kind of developed a really nice clean eating habit. I mean, I wouldn't say clean, but like a balanced maybe eating habit over the years. I definitely have been working on, putting all of those ideologies of, oh, what is healthy eating or whatever out of my head, and just like kind of like working on eating intuitively, eating whole foods most of the time, and also not being afraid to really, I mean, indulge sometimes. And I think that that's done wonders for my mentality and my focus and my ability just to like carry myself out through the day. And yeah, on the well-being track, I also have a very like a skin routine and a hair routine that I do every day. So it's like every day I get up, I do my skin routine. I like, even though I work from home most of the time, I like to put like a little makeup on, feel fresh. I also have my hair routine that I do and try to really keep my natural waves going. And so that might sound like silly to say, or it might not sound like it's quite up your alley, but I think like the whole thing of like taking care of my body after going through those hard experiences and trying to manage academia and, just, I guess, be a human being, has really revolutionized the way that I work throughout the day. And then some things that I do for my brain is that, with the ADHD, especially now that I'm medicated, the medication makes me really, really focus, but that means that I could focus for like 12 or 13 hours a day. But that also means that if I focus for too long or if I think too long into the day, I will be awake all night. So I really do have to practice kind of like a stopping point in my day and like kind of even a transition. Usually that transition is me cooking dinner for myself and my partner. And so, yeah, I definitely try to cut off when I'm going to just stop thinking about academics and work and research and all that stuff. Or else, yeah, I'm gonna be up all night long. Another thing that I do at the end of the night is that I read a book before I go to bed. It's an audio book because I can't read a book to save my life with my eyeballs. But I know people kind of give like, the little phone games and stuff a little bit of grief, but I like to just sit in my bed, listen to my book for a couple of hours, and play a game. And I think that that's been really good into helping me just like turn off all the stress from the day and get reset for the next day. And then finally, there's some things that I practice kind of during my workday that help me avoid the burnout. For the like, I pretty much work from home most of the times, and some of the things that I do, I talk about using a timer all the time. I use a timer throughout the day just to help me kind of like to stay motivated on my task. I usually write out like a little list of things that I have to accomplish that day, and then I give myself like literally a time limit to how long I'm going to work on those, because things like I talked about before, emails I sometimes can get really focused on, and I can spend an hour just trying to write an email that just says like, "Hey, thanks. Okay, goodbye." You know what I mean? So I've started kind of giving myself a time limit when I'm answering emails. First of all, I only answer emails either first thing in the morning or at night. I don't like obsessively, I used to obsessively check my emails, which gave me a lot of stress throughout the day. But now I check them once or twice a day. I only spend maybe like 15 to 30 minutes at a time checking them. I use a timer throughout the day to help me kind of switch up tasks to stay motivated and interested. So, yeah, usually I have like maybe 4 or 5 tasks that I just spend an hour on a day. And when that timer goes off, I just stop and I move on to the next thing. And then if I have to go out, if I have to go to a work event or something like that, those things are the surefire ways that are going to lead me straight into burnout. So recently I've been practicing a lot of strategies that way to kind of like help keep myself feeling less tired and less stressed at the end of the day. And so some of the things that I've done is I just tell people, like, I'm explicitly clear, like with like the ADHD and like how that can lead to burnout in different ways than maybe other people are used to. So, all of my supervisors and things like that, they know that I have ADHD. And I tell them, like, hey, if I'm in a work event, I'm like, I'm going to go sit over by myself for like 5 or 10 minutes. Or I always try to, at one of my last events, I found a place that was quieter and didn't have as many people. And then I invited like a few people that I wanted to talk to that spot so that, we could have a conversation without the whole, room just chattering around us. And so, yeah, those are some things that have found that have been really, really great for me in kind of managing burnout, because without those things, I would just be a chaotic stress ball and I would just be probably crying all the time. So, let's talk about some of the things that you can recognize as signs of potential burnout. Okay, so first of all, burnout is not just about being tired, it is emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and a drop in productivity that might make you feel a little bit like quicksand. So let's talk about some signs of burnout. Okay, so we're going to talk about like emotional, physical, some cognitive, and some behavioral signs. So first of all, on the emotional side, if you have started feeling like you're dreading doing everything, or you're hopeless, or you've just started to get a lot of anxiety, like those are some signs you need to hit the brakes, right? Physical signs, if you're getting a lot of headaches, especially if you're looking at a computer all day, like sometimes in the past, have gotten headaches, for weeks at a time because of that. Insomnia, especially if you find yourself starting to get sick all the time. Some cognitive signs are things like brain fog, you're procrastinating a lot, you're really having difficulty concentrating. Maybe you're trying to read a paper and you find yourself like, oh my gosh, I've been staring at this one paragraph forever and I still have no idea what that says. That's a sign that you need to take a break. And then behavioral signs, yeah, if you're avoiding work, if you start to withdraw socially, or if you're, yeah, over relying on things like stimulants, like caffeine, a lot of times, like that can be really, really harmful to your health. So how can we address burnout? I've spoken a little bit about what I have done for myself, but of course it's not going to look the same for everybody. So you can't just you push through burnout. You have to pause, you have to recalibrate, and you have to rebuild the structures of how you do everyday life. So, step one, I would say, is acknowledge it. Burnout thrives in silence. And I think a lot of times we don't even realize that we're heading towards burnout or that we're in burnout. So, you really need to acknowledge it to yourself that, hey, maybe this is a sign that we're going down a bad road. But also, don't be afraid to talk to it with someone else, because I mean, I find a lot of times in the issues that we deal with in our PhD life, we think that we're alone, but we're really not. So I would encourage you to, acknowledge it in a way that you maybe reach out to a peer or a friend or a supervisor or a therapist if you need to. There's no shame in doing any of that and being real about what you're going through. I would say number two is start to reclaim your boundaries. Just take a look at your workday and all the crazy stuff that you do and see how you can kind of like do it different. So set work hours for yourself. Like I said, like I have a cutoff time at the end of my workday that I just don't do any work after that because I will then obsess over it like for the rest of the night, right? Take breaks. I know it's so hard to want to pause, especially when we're like hyper focused on something, but make sure that you are setting yourself to take at least like one, good break throughout the day, eat a good lunch, and then come back. And overall, and reclaiming the boundaries is figure out where you're glorifying this overworkingness and then just stop doing it. And I know that kind of seems like stupid to say, just stop doing it. But, like just really, really think about, like for me, I've started to think like, hey, you know what? It's going to get done when it gets done. Of course, I understand how to organize my priorities and the deadlines and all of that stuff. But if I don't get something done, one day, then, I just have to start thinking, well, it's going to get done probably tomorrow. And again, I don't mean to go back to the timer thing, but it's a lifesaver for me. But if you use a timer and you figure out how much time you spend on certain tasks, then you can kind of see like how much like easier your workday is going to go in terms of like if I set a timer again for emails and I maybe set it for 30 minutes, but then today when I was answering emails, it only took me 10 minutes. So I was just like, oh, okay, I don't have to sit here and think like a huge chunk of my day is going to be replying to emails. It only takes me maybe 30 minutes to quickly write up an outline for somebody. Now I'm not thinking like, oh my gosh, this is this big task that I got accomplished today. And so overall, what I'm getting at is a lot of times when I think that there's all of these things that are going to overwhelm me and take like 8 hours of my day and it's going to be horrific, really, some of those tasks are not that big, they're not that long, and I can accomplish most of those tasks maybe in a couple of hours instead of thinking that's going to take me my whole workday. So, I would really encourage you to stop glorifying the overworkingness and really be real with how much time you're spending actually working and help rewire your brain to think like, okay, it's not going to take that long. And if it does take a long time, then you know what? It's going to get done eventually. I hope that made sense. Good God. But anyway, let's move on to number three, reconnecting with your purpose. Okay, don't forget to revisit why your research matters. Okay, don't get so bogged out in trying to understand qualitative research, quantitative research, all these different digital tools and all of the steps and how am I going to get through IRB to forget about why you're doing this in the first place. And so I would encourage you to, yeah, again, talk it out with somebody, keep a journal, or just set out some goals. I like to on my desktop, I like to periodically just keep like a little digital post-it note on my desktop of what my goals are. And so when I get into the thick of things that are really complex and really heavy, it's always really nice for me just to kind of just go back a second, look at those goals, and really remember why I'm doing this stuff in the first place. Yeah, and then number four, look, restore your body, okay? Don't forget to sleep, eat, and move. I know a lot of people are not necessarily, I know I talked a lot about, how health is kind of a part of my well-being practices, and not everyone is about, super eating healthy or getting a full 8 hours or, going for a run or moving, and that's fine, but you should incorporate those things somehow into your life. So yeah, it doesn't have to be trying to figure out how to sleep 8 hours, but like maybe like taking a cat nap once or maybe even just like a couple times a week. It doesn't have to be eating super, super healthy, but just remembering to maybe try and eat breakfast one day. Okay. It doesn't have to be, yeah, running or like going to the gym and being like, a big like workout fanatic. It just means like just go outside and go for a walk for 15 minutes, okay? And these are not meant to be productivity hacks, but it's just an aspect of resistance and care. And then number five, like build a support system. Don't try to do this PhD journey alone, right? Join writing groups, meme chats, or accountability groups. Don't let your isolation fuel your burnout. I talk about, all the time how great it has been really networking and getting out there and meeting new people because then I understand that they understand what I am going through and I understand that I am not alone. Overall, if you didn't get anything else out of all of my ramblings today, look, challenge toxic norms, perfectionism, martyrdom, and prestige deception, like obsession, good lord. Those things are, it's just toxic, and we can't live our lives trying to get up to these ideals. Normalize rest, normalize therapy, and normalize saying no. I know that I talk about saying yes all the time, but that does not mean that you have to say yes so much that you've loaded yourself up to burnout. You know what I mean? So say no if you need some time to take a break one day and people want to go out or whatever. Sorry, can't do it. If somebody asks you if you have time to do a task, but you're like, oh my gosh, I've got 85 other things to do. If that's the first thought that like pops into your head, then just say no. And I would encourage us all just to start to advocate for a structural change. We need better funding, we need clearer expectations, and we really need mental health support when it comes to academics because this whole thing about, being this crazy work engine is just not going to work for all of us. So, anyway, if you need some help in your academic journey, be sure to check me out on TikTok. I got a lot of tips and hacks to writing, research, and academics on there. So you can find me at Life with Dr. Mandy, or you can probably just search Dr. Mandy. Mandy is spelled Mandie. If you need some editing help for your dissertation, your thesis, your journal article, your coursework, please reach out to me on my email, mandykf@gmail.com. That's MANDIE, kangaroo foxtrot at gmail.com. Or you can check my stuff out on my website. That's www.drmandyedits.com. Okay, in the meantime, I'm going to go take a nap. You need to go take a nap. Let's go take a nap together. It's not weird. It's just restorative, okay? I will talk to you later. See you next week. In the meantime, goodbye.